Hello students, in previous class we discussed about law of conservation of mass and law of constant proportion. Today we are discussing about Dalton atomic theory. So before going to discussing the Dalton atomic theory, why are the laws are valid? Law of conservation of mass, law of constant proportion, why these laws are valid? By early 19th century, the scientists knew some laws governing chemical reactions. By earlier 19th century, they know some laws related to some chemical reactions. So why are these laws are valid? Why cannot the elements combine in any proportion? So why the elements are combined in fixed proportion? So many scientists try to give appropriate explanation. The English school teacher John Dalton proposed the basic theory about the nature of matter. So Dalton reasoned his proposals as mentioned below. So many scientists try to give appropriate explanation. In that, one of the scientists, John Dalton, he proposed one basic theory about the nature of a matter. Okay, so Dalton reasoned his proposal and mentioned below. If mass was to be conserved, then all the elements must be made up of extremely small particles are called as atoms. If mass was to be conserved, means to occur this law of conservation of mass, all the elements must be made up of extremely small particles that are called as atoms. Okay. Second one, if the law of constant proportion is to be followed, the particles of same substance cannot be different. So, the law of constant proportion is to be followed. The particles of same substance cannot be different. So, based on the above laws, Dalton proposed a new system of chemical philosophy. So, based on the law of conservation of mass and law of constant proportion, Dalton proposed a new system of chemical philosophy. Okay, so that is Dalton atomic theory. So, what are the main postulates of this Dalton atomic theory? Now we will discuss. Matter consists of indivisible particles are called as atoms. Means matter is made up of small particles that are called as atoms. Atoms are neither created nor destroyed in a chemical reaction. So, chemical reactions involve reorganization of atoms. Atoms are neither created nor destroyed during a chemical reaction. A chemical reaction involves reorganization of atoms. All the atoms of a given element have identical mass and identical properties. So all the atoms of a given element have identical mass and identical properties. Atoms of different element have different masses and different properties. Compounds are formed when the atoms of different elements combine in simple whole number ratio. So when the atoms of different elements combine, then compounds are formed. That is a chemical change is the union or separation of atoms is in whole number. When atoms of different elements combine in different whole number ratio, they form different compounds. Carbon dioxide CO, carbon dioxide CO2. Hence, one carbon, one oxygen combined in 1:1 and 1:2 ratio respectively to give two different compounds. So what are the main postulates of Dalton atomic theory? Matter is made up of small particles. Means matter consists of indivisible particles that are called as atoms. Atoms are neither created nor destroyed during a chemical reaction. A chemical reaction involves reorganization of atoms. All the atoms of given element have identical mass and identical properties. Atoms of different element have different masses and different properties. Next, compounds are formed when the atoms of different elements combine in simple whole number ratio. So, compounds will form when the atoms of different elements are combined in simple whole number elements. When the atoms of different elements are combined together, then it will form compounds. When atoms of different elements combine in different whole number of ratios, they form different compounds. So, when the atoms of different elements combine in different ratio, then they form different compounds. Atoms of different elements combined in different ratio, then they form different compounds. For example, carbon monoxide, formula CO. So, it will form when carbon and oxygen combine in 1:1 ratio. Carbon dioxide, formula CO2. Okay, so the CO2 will form when carbon and oxygen combined in 1:2 ratio respectively. So atoms of different elements combined in different whole number of ratio, then they form different compounds. Okay. About 2600 years ago, an Indian rishi called Kanada also postulated atom in his Vaisheshika Sutra. Okay, so about 2600 years ago, an Indian rishi called Kanada also postulated atoms in his Vaisheshika Sutra. The actual name of Kanada was Kasyapa. He was renamed after his uh, Kanasiddhanta. He proposed that all forms of matter are composed of very small particles is known as Anu, and each Anu may be made up of still smaller particles are called as Paramanu. So the word atom is derived from the Greek word atomio, means indivisible. Okay, so about 2600 years ago, an Indian rishi is called Kanada also postulated atoms in his Vaisheshika Sutra. About 2600 years ago, an Indian rishi, his name is called as Kanada. He is explained about atoms in his Vaisheshika Sutra. His actual name of Kanada was Kasyapa. Okay, so the actual name is Kasyapudu. Okay, so after this Kanasiddhanta, his name is renamed as Kanada. He proposed that all the forms of matter is composed of very small particles known as Anu, and each Anu may be made up of still smaller particles are called as Paramanu. The word atom is derived from the Greek word is called as atomio, which means indivisible. Hello students, in previous class we discussed about law of conservation. Now we are discussing one more topic, atoms and molecules. Very often you may have heard that atoms are the building blocks of all matter. So atoms are the building blocks of matter, means matter is made up of small particles are called as atoms, means matter is made up of atoms. But what does it means? It means that matter is composed of small particles known as atoms. These atoms are so small that we cannot see them even with a high powered microscope. These atoms are so small so we cannot see them even with a high powered microscope. So the number of atoms present even in a small amount of matter is very large. So if we take very small amount of matter, then in that very large number of atoms are present. Okay, so matter is made up of small particles are called as atom. These atoms we cannot see even with a high powered microscope. So if we take very small amount of matter, the number of atoms present in that is very large. Okay, the aluminum foil that we use to pack the food might seem thin to you, but it has atoms in crores. Okay, so the aluminum foil we are using to pack the food, it seems to be very thin. Okay, but it has atoms in crore, means crores, in crores atoms it will contain. Okay, are elements also made up of atoms? We know that substances are made up of atoms or molecules. Okay, so we know that the substances are made up of atoms or molecules. Atoms are the most fundamental particles that can have an independent existence. Okay, so we know that the substances are made up of atoms or molecules. Substances are made up of atoms or molecules. Atoms are the most fundamental of all the particles that can have independent existence. Sometimes two or more atoms combine to form a big particles. So sometimes two or more atoms combine to form a big particles. When atoms combine, they form a molecule. When the particles of a substance contain only one kind of atom, that substance is called as atoms. In elements, the smallest particle may be atom or molecules. Okay, or the elements also made up of atoms? Yes, we know that substances are made up of atoms or molecules. Atoms are the most fundamental of all particles. Okay, atoms are the most fundamental of all particles that can have independent existence. Sometimes two or more atoms combine to form a big particle. Sometimes two or more atoms combine sometimes two or more atoms combine to form a big particles. So atoms are the most fundamental of all particles that can have independent existence. Sometimes two or more atoms combine to form a big particles. When atoms combine, they form molecules. Okay, sometimes two or more atoms combine to form a big particles. No, when atoms combine, they form molecules. Okay, so when the particles of a substance contain only one type of atoms, then the substance is called as element. Okay, so in element, the smallest particle may be atom or molecule. Okay, when the particles of a substance that contain only one kind of atoms, okay, then that substance is called as element. In element, the smallest particles may be atom or molecule. There are many elements. So smallest particle is an atom. Okay, there are so many elements. The smallest particle is an atom. Iron, copper, zinc, aluminum, silver, gold, these all are the examples of a substance. Means these all are the examples of elements in which the smallest particle is an atoms. Means in elements, the smallest particle is atom or molecules. No, so many elements are there in iron, copper, zinc, aluminum, silver, gold, etc. These all are the example for elements. In that, the smallest particle is atom. Okay, oxygen and nitrogen also example of a substance which the particle are the combination of two identical atoms. So oxygen and nitrogen also example for element only, but in this the smallest particle is molecule. Okay, so atoms of same elements or different elements can join together to form a molecules. In atoms of different elements joined together to form a new substance is known as compound. So in elements, the smallest particle is atoms or molecules. Okay, so iron, copper, zinc, aluminum, silver, gold, etc. That contain the smallest particle. That smallest particle is atom. Oxygen, nitrogen, these are the examples of substance. This contain a smallest particle. That smallest particle is molecules. Okay, atoms of same elements or different elements can join together to form a molecule, and atoms of different elements join together to form a new substance. It is known as compound. So we can have molecules of elements and molecules of compounds. Molecules can be defined as the smallest particle of a substance that independent exists and retain all the properties of that substance. Now we are discussing one more topic, atoms. Why do we name elements? Do you know that gold is called in your language? Okay, do you know that what is gold called in your language? But in other language it would be have different names. There are so many languages in the world that it is not possible to know the different names of each element in different language. Okay, so what we are calling gold in our language, we will call bangaram. Okay, in other language, means in English we are calling that as a gold, in Hindi we are calling that as a sona, like that. Okay, so there are so many languages in the world, so that it is not possible to know the different names of each element in different languages. So like this, so many languages are there. So in different languages we call the substance with different names. So there are so many languages in the world that it is not possible to know the different names of each elements in different language. So to help the scientists to communicate without confusion, we must have one name for each element that it was accepted by everyone. Okay, so if elements also called with different names in different languages, then it may confusion to the scientist. To help the scientists to communicate without confusion, we must have one name for each element that is accepted by everyone. So gold is there, that we are calling in Telugu Bangaram. In English it is called as gold. In Hindi it is called as Sona. So if you call, okay, like that, different languages are there in the world. So like this gold, if we call the element in different languages, it is very problematic to scientists. So to avoid this problem, we must to avoid this problem for all the scientists and for all the person who are in the world, each element have one special name. Okay, so to help the scientists to communicate without confusion, we must have one name for each element that is accepted by everyone. So John Berzelius suggested that initial letter of an element from its name John Berzelius suggested that initial letter of an element from its name in English written is capital should be symbol that of element. Okay, so to avoid the problem, each element have one separate name. It should be accepted by the everyone. How the elements like hydrogen and oxygen got their names? So hydrogen and oxygen are the example for elements now. How these are got their names? Sometimes elements are named based on their property. For example, the Latin word for water is hydro. So that the element that combined with oxygen to give water is named as hydrogen. So the Latin word for water is hydro. The elements combined with oxygens to give water was named as hydrogen. Okay, when hydrogen and oxygen combine, it will form water, no? So the element which is combined with oxygen to give water, it is called as hydrogen. Like that, the name of the hydrogen got. At one time, people believed that any substance that contained oxygen would be acidic in nature. So the Latin word for acid is oxy. Hence the gas was called as oxygen. So at one time, people believed that any substance that contained oxygen that would be acidic in nature. The Latin word for acid is oxy. The Latin word for acid is oxy. Hence the gas was called as oxygen, meaning gas that forms acid. It was later discovered that the acidic property was not related to oxygen. However, by then the name had come into common use, so it was not changed. So place of discovery of element can also play a role in its naming. Okay, for example, the gas which was first discovered in the sun. So place of discovery of an element can also play a role in its naming. For example, the gas which was first discovered in the sun, okay, was named helium. Greek name for sun is helio. So the gas which was discovered in the sun was named as helium. The Greek name for sun is helio. So this helium is discovered from the sun, no? So the Greek name of sun is helio. By depending on that, helium got this name. So elements names are discovered. Elements names, it came from the place and where it will discover, like that. And some elements names were named on the honor of scientist. Okay, so for example, Einsteinium, Fermium, Rutherfordium, Mendelevium, like that. Okay, so here elements names are discovered by depending on the country's names, and elements names are discovered by depending on the scientist name, and from where it will come, from where it will discover. By that also elements names are came. So here we discussed about Dalton atomic theory and atoms and molecule. Why do we name the elements? So why do we name the elements? Substances are there that we are calling in different languages with different names. If you call like that, element also if you call like that, that is problematic to the scientist. To avoid these problems, elements are called with one particular name. This is accepted by everyone. Okay, so the elements names are discovered by depending on the scientist. Some elements names are derived from the country's names. Some elements names are derived from the planet's name. Okay, like Mercury, uranium. These okay. Some elements names are derived from the planet's name, no? Like Mercury, uranium, like that. Okay. Next, some elements names are derived from the country's name. Germanium, like that. Americium, like that. Okay, some elements names are derived from the scientist name, like that. Einsteinium, Mendelevium, Rutherfordium, okay, Fermium, like that. Okay. Next topic we will discuss about the symbol of elements and atomicity, valency, like that. About that we will discuss in next class. Why do we name elements? Do you know that?